97.3 ESPN.com's John McMullen. We just saw Argentina win some football. Lose, John, some football.
Real football, if you talk to people in Europe. Football.
That's
F-U-T-B-O-L.
All right, so some football stuff to get into here. Number one, let's start with a couple things local, close to home here. Nice story to start off with here. And the Eagles, and nice gesture to Jon Dorenbos, everybody. They gave Jon Dorenbos a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, we mentioned that before. They've given at least a number of rings out for people that weren't here with the organization last year. So, and obviously John had been a part of this organization for so long, and not only as a member of the team, but all the work he did in the community, and obviously he had the health issues, which ultimately the trade may have saved his life. And then you talk about his narrative all the way back to when he was young and the issues he had with his family. It's really compelling story for Jon Dorenbos. But I got to tell you, I don't know who's in. I assume it's Jeffrey Lurie. Where's the cutoff point? When you start giving these rings to people who were part of the organization, not part of the team this year, I mean, it's his team. He can handle it however he wants, obviously, but that's going to be a tough.
Is this one of those things where they bought in bulk? Like the more rings you bought, the better deal you got, so they might as well just hand out the extra ones?
I assume that's always the case, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be somebody at some point. You got to put the demarcation line, and I want to see that name that's just underneath it, because they're going to be upset.
I can imagine there's like a guy sitting in the boardroom, like Lori and the rest of the guys debating back and forth. Should we give this guy a ring? No, I vote yes. No, I vote no.
Hey, nobody's going to credit, as I said, with John and what happened to him. And he was such a great part of this team. And I said when he moved on originally, if you think about him being a long snapper and the reality of that position and the fact that he was so beloved in the city of Philadelphia, and that's because of all the work he did outside in the community. There's not too many long snappers that reach sort of a level of local fame that he did.
Yeah. No, and listen, just knowing John personally, we hosted a lot of shows together. I got to say, I mean, the guy that you've seen on these television shows, the magician shows, and everything else, he is that guy. I mean, from what in my dealings with him anyway, on the air, off the air. I mean, we used to host the show at a different establishment, and most of those guys, they came, they did their hour of the show that they were required to do, and then an autograph session afterwards, and then they were out the door. I mean, Dorenbos was there, did the show for an hour, did the autograph session, and then basically said, hey, everybody, anybody want to see magic? And he hung. I mean, that guy went above and beyond, and I'm not talking about just one time. Every single time he co-hosted that show with me, he did this show and stuck around. And then, I mean, he was such a great sport on the air. He is a legitimate, genuine person from my dealings with him. And I know as a long snapper, you probably don't interview him or talk to him all that much for, the big stories or anything. But I can't say that the guy that I met was a phony. You know what I mean?
Oh, no. He was everybody liked John. That's part of the reason he's got that ring. And he was that way in the locker room. And that was the concern when they moved on. You remember we talked about it, and we talked about some of the leaders in the locker room and if the Eagles would be able to replace him. John was one of those guys. Ultimately, obviously, they did. They didn't have an issue with it. But there were a number of really good guys in that locker room. Jordan Matthews, very popular person. And John was at the top of that list. And then, yeah, I mean, he would hold court in the locker room. Anytime there was visitors, he would do the magic show, and everybody gathered around. And I remember the Saints put up, as soon as they got him, he was in their locker room, and he was one of the most popular players because he gathered everybody. He did all the magic tricks. Everybody loves the guy.
Hey, John, before we leave the ring talk, how about the fact that they're giving away a chance, or there's a chance that one lucky fan can end up with a ring? This just came out within the last day or so that they're going to launch this World Championship ring sweepstakes and tie it to their autism challenge. For as low as $10, you could get 100 entries into this challenge, and then somebody is going to win a World Championship NFL Super Bowl ring, just like the players had.
Yeah, like Mike was saying, I guess the more you make, the better deal you get. But that's obviously from a community standpoint, and as far as working in the community, that's the thing that Jeffrey Lurie holds the closest to him, is that autism challenge. It's very important to him personally. So obviously it's very important to the organization, and this is a good way to raise money for it. So it's just another thing that you put in the Jeffrey Lurie check mark for a category. He's handling this very, very well.
John McMullen with us, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles Insider. John, you wrote on the website, I don't know if Mike got into it with you or not, but I wanted to go through your spring rookie report card. That's up on our website right now at 973ESPN.com, and you basically were going through some of the spring rookies and how they looked in OTAs and kind of a status report of where some of these guys are. And I guess first and foremost, you'd start off with Dallas Goedert, the tight end, and how he looked so far and what kind of grade you're giving him so far.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas looks like everything they said he was, and as far as an athlete, as far as his body type, he really is another Zach Ertz type. He's just really, really long. He can, he's tremendously athletic for his size, and he's got great hands and a huge catching radius. So when Doug Peterson talked about him during minicamp, he made sure to sort of pump the brakes because he made so many big catches and big plays. You have to see how he handles the physical part of it, because he wasn't known for his blocking. In college, he was used more of a receiver, and at this level, he'll be asked to block more. But he does have the frame for it. And I have talked to Mike a lot about the fact that if he's as good as he looks, then the Eagles are going to have some interesting choices to make. And the fact of playing two tight ends more and perhaps taking a receiver off the field. But those are good decisions to have. I mean, the more good players you have, the better it is for you. But he could make it very, very difficult as far as what the base formation of this team is going to be. If he can prove he can block a little bit at this level.
Yeah, and of course you have in the article that Jim Schwartz himself says it's off-season is the time for teaching. Training camp is really the evaluation period, and you threw out Donnell Pumphrey as an example of somebody who looked great in the spring only to kind of fall off the table and not be around by the summertime where his lack of strength and size was exposed. Let's talk about another draft pick in Avonte Maddox, the corner that they picked.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because if you look at him, he looks like an NFL slot cornerback. He's undersized. He's got tremendous speed. But if you watch him at Pitt, he didn't play inside. He played outside. And you can get away with that at the college level because you don't have receivers like Julio Jones and Mike Evans every week, or these giant athletic guys. And it's really difficult for somebody Avonte Maddox size to play outside the NFL. So ultimately he's going to end up in the slot. It's a matter of how quickly he can learn the position. Throughout the spring, he's pretty much playing with the second team. Eagles rotated a lot of bodies with the first team. He was 99% of the time with the second team. So they're taking him, moving him along slowly. They obviously want him to be a slot cornerback. That's pretty much where he's going to have to play in this league. And I think it'll be a little bit of an adjustment for him just because he's used to playing outside the numbers at Pitt.
Now, John, we're spending so much time here on NBA Draft Night talking about Michael Porter Jr. and how his back and hip injury problems might be an issue. Well, the Eagles got a guy at defensive end who the injury might have helped him get. That might have helped him fall to that spot, and that's Josh Sweat.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, if he was healthy, he was one of the top recruits in the country going to Florida State. Then he had a horrific sort of Teddy Bridgewater-like injury as a senior in high school. Slowly came along incrementally. Is always going to have to play with a brace from this point forward. That's never going away. So it's always going to be in the back of your mind. It's going to be a concern. But athletically, man, he just looks like an NFL edge rusher. He's got the speed. He's got the first step. He's got the length. He's got everything you want. And the good news for the Eagles is they also have time to develop them because they're so deep at defensive end. Brandon Graham will be back. They have Michael Bennett. They have Chris Long, Derek Barnett. So they won't need them to play this season unless there's a rash of injuries. But you can see by 2019, he could be a big part of this defense.
And that's on the defensive side of the football. On the offense, I'll package the two offensive linemen together. One sort of established, one definitely under the project category, and that's Matt Pryor and Jordan Mailata.
Yeah, I think, Jordan's going to be on the practice squad. He's just, starting from square one. But the Eagles obviously like his and what's not to like as far as his size and athleticism, but he just has never played professional football before, never played collegiate football, never played a down of football. So it's, as you can imagine, that's tough to do. And at times it was Josh Sweat who was making him look silly during mini camp, and he's going to have those growing pains. So you're going to hear this, and I guarantee you, and I'm not going to pick on certain people, but people are going to say, well, the Eagles got to keep them, and I'm talking about reporters, the Eagles are going to keep them on a 53-man roster because they'll be afraid to get them through waivers. Nobody's picking up this guy on waivers. That's how raw he is. So you can afford to put him on the practice squad, and that's where the Eagles will certainly go and hope he can develop after a full year with Jeff Stoutland. As far as Matt Pryor, he's got a chance to make this team, and it's going to be interesting. I think a lot of it depends on where they go with Isaac Seumalo. I could see him being trade bait in the summer, and then a guy like Pryor who can play right guard, right tackle. Then he's probably got a roster spot.
Real quick on Jordan, they drafted him in the 7th round. Did they draft him because they were afraid someone else would take him? Like, why didn't they just take somebody else and then sign him as a free agent? Like, you know what I mean? Like, get another player in here.
It's not they obviously wanted him. They not only drafted him, they traded up to get him. But it's not about 2018. With him, it's about probably not even 2019, probably 2020 and beyond.
Right, but that's my point, though. Like, why not just stay where you were, draft a guy, and then sign him after the draft if you were that interested in him?
Because they probably understood that there was another team that wanted to do the same thing.
Okay.
And draft him in the 7th round. And put him on the practice squad, get him into a developmental program, and hope to take advantage of his God-given size and athletic gifts. So they want him here. But the reality in the NFL, I mean, you can't afford to give out roster spots for guys that raw. So, again, you are going to hear this narrative. I guarantee it. Mark this down. You're going to hear a lot of reporters say, the Eagles might keep Mailata to keep him because somebody will pick him up on waivers. It's not going to happen. If you think about how many offensive linemen you can dress, you need a swing tackle. You need an interior backup on game day. And you might keep 9, you might keep 10. You can't afford to keep a project like that on a regular roster. So they'll get him through and get him on the practice squad, and from that, we'll see if he can develop.
John, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say 6'8", 350 is who we're talking about, too, by the way. I mean, just a massive, massive guy.
Right, yeah. That's Jordan Mailata, the 7th-round pick from the Eagles that the guys were discussing. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. John McMullen is on the Boardwalk Honda hotline here. Let's take a look at some things going on. You know, Baker Mayfield was on the Cowherd show. That was an interesting story that is making some news because apparently Cowherd kind of took a couple shots at him. The real story is that Mayfield came right back after him, and essentially some people are now praising him, you know, because one of the things that Cowherd said was, you know, hey, I like good decision-making, and you got to make split-second decisions, and he's essentially coming right back at him, so people are kind of giving him some credit for, you know, having some split-second decision answers to have there, and he was being criticized by the radio host for running over to the sideline and not celebrating with his teammates. And he said, hey, what they don't show you on TV is I'm running towards the student section in the band and giving those people a chance to be a part of all this.
Yeah, I applaud Baker. Obviously, I mean, Colin's on the radio. You guys are on the radio. I'm on the radio. We're, you know, we give opinions, and that's his opinion. But let's be realistic. Colin Cowherd has no idea what kind of teammate Baker Mayfield is. And I applaud him for standing up for himself. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having an opinion. But understand the guy making the opinion isn't around the Cleveland Browns or wasn't around the Oklahoma Sooners. So you can only speculate what kind of teammate he is. You have other people saying, you know, people in Cleveland told me that's the reason the Browns took him. Because when they got him, he was a natural leader, and everybody gravitates behind him. So, yeah, I don't take it very seriously, and I think Baker should stand up for himself.
One thing, too, is, you know, there's all these rookie quarterbacks, and we know that he is obviously in the battle with Tyrod Taylor. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the week, John, and there's another guy who played for Cleveland and was a quarterback, and that's Johnny Manziel. And June Jones, who's a respected, you know, football guy, especially in the pros, but in his time in the league, he is saying that he thinks that Manziel belongs in the NFL, that he's been humbled. So are we beginning to feel that there could be a time when Johnny's back in the league, and not only in the league, but is he talented enough to play in the league?
Yeah, well, he's definitely talented enough, or he was before he sort of destroyed his body. I mean, it's a completely different guy. He's obviously in better shape than he was at his low point, but we don't know how what he went through affected him from where he was before. But the kid that came out of college, who was a first-round pick, look, he had some issues. He was undersized. But there's no doubt he had NFL talent. And I wrote about this at Get More Sports a little while ago. I think it was a good idea to go to the CFL, especially with June Jones' team, because he has the long history in the NFL. And that's who NFL decision makers are going to ask about. That's what they're going to ask June about. What kind of teammate is he? Has he matured? Is he on the right path? And they trust that guy. So all that is a positive. But while saying he belongs in the NFL, hey, let's let him play it down in the CFL first. I mean, he's not the starter there. So I think we got to pump the brakes there. But this is a good first step for him, and I think a needed first step, because he had to prove, more so than the athleticism, he had to prove he could be a professional and do just the normal everyday things that NFL and CFL players do.
John, there's a report out there about Martavius Bryant saying that he hasn't missed or failed a drug test. There's conflicting reports. What are you hearing about Martavius Bryant?
Well, the NFL is very they're not allowed to give out that type of information. It's supposed to be a closed program, so you generally don't get that information until the suspension is handed down. It can leak at times, which is never a good thing from the league's perspective, because it could get them in trouble down the line at some point. So all you can speculate on is his history, and obviously he's the guy who's had many issues in the past, and it's always a concern. And I talked about that a little bit earlier this week with guys like Josh Gordon. To me, as a coach, and Oakland traded for him, it would be very hard for me to rely on him and count on him and say, okay, this guy's going to be a part of my offense. Not from a talent perspective. He's got a chance to be a very good receiver, always has in this league. But how do you count on a guy like that? So from the organization's perspective, it's very difficult.
John McMullen, follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen on Twitter. And don't forget to read his NFL columns at GetMoreSports.com. And, of course, the Eagles training camp is about 5 weeks away. The training camp reporting dates for all 32 teams are now set. So you can find out your favorite teams' training camp dates. The Eagles have rookies and veterans coming in on July the 25th. So just over a month from today. John, thanks so much, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.